stuff like crop circles and UFOs, these are simply uh, flexion in the syntactical machinery of reality. I mean, the main thing to understand, see, is that we're imprisoned in some kind of work of art. There are no laws of physics. That's all horseshit. There is no physics. It isn't like that. It's a syntactical structure of some sort. And to the degree that you can deprogram yourself from what you've been taught, you discover then the raw stuff of reality, which can be put together in many, many different ways.
The recent crop circle of the gingerbread man fractal image, in a way, is prescient of your theories, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I'm pretty harsh on crop circles. I mean, I think it's just malarkey, basically. I don't understand why other people don't think so. I mean, it is so obviously malarkey. I mean, doesn't John Michel think it's a little strange that the telluric message was written within driving distance of his front door? I mean, how far would it have gotten if it had been the wheat fields of Siberia? There's something a little curious about how it is strewn directly in the path of those most likely to be its most willing flacks. And, we've gone from being told no human being could do this to, in fact, holding contests where human beings make splendid crop circles. My theory on crop circles is quite simply that it's because when you go to these crop circles and actually see what it's like to be there, here's what you see. You see the crop circles, amazing. You see a few ragtag British freaks wandering around scratching their heads, and you see a shitload of Japanese tourists. Well, then when you look at world media, you see that the Japanese media pays an incredible amount of attention to these things. And I think they are a covert operation run by MIDI, the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Quite obviously, this is an experiment in the semiotics of brand recognition. And all over England, there are roving bands of Japanese tourists who, at the snap of a Nikon, rush into the fields, and from a tradition of centuries of ninja stem snapping, they produce these things Johnny quick, and then put their Nikons back on. And
I don't understand why MIDI would be behind this. What's the benefit of it?
well, they're studying the Western mind and its relationship to brands, to symbols. These are symbols, is what they're. I mean, people say they're communications. Well, they're a shit-brained form of communication because they don't communicate anything, for God's sake. I mean, what kind of communication is it that doesn't communicate? So, and a number of people have behaved very oddly around the crop circles. I mean, for example, the other thing you see when you go to southern England is, my God, there are RAF bases everywhere, and nuclear weapons bunkers, and cruise missiles, and this and that, and you're asked to believe that the Ministry of Defense is utterly sanguine about the fact that the airspace of England is being violated night after night by a mysterious agency that is, if you can snap the stem of a wheat stalk, you can throw the switch on a machine. The Ministry of Defense would go crazy if this were real. One theory Rupert and I came up with is, it's called the out on a limb theory, which is, it is possible that inside MI5, which is British intelligence, there is a certain amount of concern about the growth of New Age ideas in England. And so the idea is to lure these people out onto a limb wilder and wilder statements about Gaian messages and the telluric forces of the earth and so forth and so on. And then once every nut in England has signed on to this phenomenon, you just hold a demonstration, bring on your jumpsuited team of crop circle makers and say, we, MI5, we did it. And you people should now all find honest work because your level of credibility is now exposed as basically close to zero. But I like the Japanese idea.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I think the cattle mutilations of a few years ago in the States were also a Japanese project. I mean, it had all the Japanese and American elements. You know, the lonely American prairie with its brooding sense of strong men and lurking evil. And then, the Japanese love of animal mutilation, shiny blades, mysterious padding around. I mean, it's...
I thought it might be a good test of the Star Wars system. The guys are having fun with the joysticks.
Well, people have suggested that, although, again, you would think the wheat fields of western Siberia would be doing it at Glastonbury. England...
They wouldn't get any status and recognition that way. I mean, they blast England, you get some recognition for it.
The human mind is incredibly perverse, I know, because I have one. And real mysteries can take enormous pressure. Real mysteries, you don't have to believe, you don't have to have been initiated, you don't have to have your aura cleared or your mantras in order. Real mysteries operate, and you get to touch. I always like, my favorite story in the gospel is the story of Thomas the Doubter. Because remember, he wasn't present when Christ came to the upper room the first time after the crucifixion. And so then Thomas came a couple of days later, and the apostles said to him, they said, the Master was here. He was here. And he said, you guys have been smoking too much of these little brown cigarettes from Lebanon. We saw him crucified. He wasn't here. Well, so then Christ came a second time, and Thomas was present. And he said, unless I put my hand into the wound, I will not believe it. And so then Christ came the second time, and he said to Thomas, he said, Thomas, come forward. He said, put your hand into the wound. And then he did. And my interpretation of that gospel story is that alone of all the apostles, it was Thomas the Doubter who touched the resurrection body, because he was the only one who had his shit together enough to doubt. And so if you doubt, they will actually let you put your hand into the wound. If you don't doubt, they will give you any kind of crap and send you happily along your way. So the best attitude towards these things, and it gets rid of the phonies, the Telocs of this world, but it doesn't get rid of the real stuff, because the real stuff is real. It's real. And there's enough of it around that you want to have a crap detector that gets you past all the phony baloney, because, people have been working miracles in the marketplace for millennia. That's just part of what goes on in the marketplace, shell games, levitation, rope tricks, regurgitation of objects. It's just ho-hum.
Well, what about military disinformation campaigns and UFOs?
Well, I felt years ago, that the cattle mutilation thing was probably a military disinformation campaign to make flying saucers seem creepy and woo-woo and all that. But the funny thing about all this is that it never comes to a head. Nothing ever happens. I mean, Jacques Vallée in one of his books pointed out that there must be 3,000 UFO encounters a month. Now, this has been going on for 45 years. And nothing. I mean, the people who wear the funny clothes hold their conferences, the magazines make their money, the lapel pins are cast, but nothing seems to happen. Now, if you compare it to science, it's interesting. Suppose we had some kind of a scientific experiment which involved measuring electrical current running down a wire. And say we had 10,000 meters on the wire, and we shoot the current down the wire, and the meters tell us that the current has an amperage of 1.6 amps. 10,000 meters tell us this within a fluctuation of 3%. But 1 meter says that the amperage is 260. What do you do with this one reading if you're a scientist? You throw it out. Say the meter was broken, obviously. Look, we got 9,999 meters that fluctuated within 1% of the expected value, and 1 meter that was 700,000% off. Broken meter. But now in the UFO phenomenon, we get rid of the 9,999 meters, and we go to the one broken meter, and we say, tell us your story. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, I had a UFO encounter, and I paid very, very close attention. Apparently closer attention than anybody has ever paid in that situation. And what I saw amazed me. I mean, I'll tell you the story
what happened?
just briefly. Well, I was in the Amazon, and we had been, it's told, this story is told actually in True Hallucinations, and we had been experimenting with all these drugs and things, and finally I noticed that in the southwest there was some kind of activity, and a voice in my head told me, watch here. And so I stayed up all night watching in the southwest and across a lake, and in the morning, about dawn, with a completely clear sky except for some sort of jungle forest mist on the horizon, about 4:30 in the morning, I saw this thin line of cloud and began to like roll in one place, like a pencil rolling in the air. And then it split into 2 parts. And then each of the 2 parts split into 2 parts. So now I was looking at 4 lens-shaped clouds hanging on the horizon about 3 miles away. And as I watched, they coalesced back into 2, then back into 1, and then I heard the whee, whee, whee sound of Hollywood science fiction UFOs. And as I watched the thing, it started toward me, and I was completely dumbfounded, and I believed at that moment, and I not only believed, I believed it was going to take me, and my knees went to water, and I just sat down, and as it came toward me, I could see orange light, a ring of orange lights on the outside, a ring of soft blue lights on the underside. It was spinning slowly. It was making the whee, whee, whee sound, and it got nearer and nearer and nearer till I could actually see the rivets on the underside of the thing. And then, in the last moment before I lost it behind the edge of the hill behind me, I saw that it was the end cap of a 1937 Hoover vacuum cleaner. That it was, in fact, the same end cap that George Adamski had suspended with a nylon thread in his garage and photographed with his Brownie camera to get the 3 balls, you know, the famous UFO with the 3 half spheres on the underside.
Yeah,
well,
classic.
that photograph was later totally debunked. It's as phony as a 3-pecker dowel. And I saw it 45 feet in diameter in the skies above the Amazon. And when it was over, I just howled because I realized, this is much more disturbing than a ship from Zeta Reticuli, because this is simultaneously confirmation and disconfirmation. Nobody in their right mind would tell that story, because the story contains within itself the seeds of its own disconfirmation. So there is something which plays with us.
Actually, that's more than you told in True Hallucinations, too. It's interesting.
Do you think it's a manifestation of your own mind, or do you think it's part of external reality, or are they the same?
But somehow we're asking the wrong question here. I talked to John Mack. Do you know who he is? He's the guy at Harvard who's so interested in that now the new thing is fetal removal under abduction circumstances. And I interviewed him in Prague, and he said, I have 1,500 documented cases of women who believe that they had the fetus removed in an abduction situation. And I said, fascinating, John. What kind of physical trauma do these women display? And he said, there's no physical trace whatsoever. And I said, fascinating. What does that imply to you, John? And he said, advanced surgical techniques of which we have no knowledge. And then I realized, I was dealing with a screwball. I mean, what? What it implies to me is 1,500 severely confused women. I just can't make the leap to any other possibility. Yet to him it meant advanced surgical techniques of which we have no knowledge.
So when you go within, what you find is, do you own that yourself? Do you believe that, that's of your being, or do you believe that?
No, there is something which I like to say, which masquerades as an extraterrestrial invasion in order to not alarm us with the real implications of what it is.
What is this mysterious relationship with the other?
Yeah, well, the other can present itself in any way that it wants. You can have this experience on mushrooms. You take mushrooms and it's whatever it is. It's cheerful, it's this, it's that. But you can stop the action and say, don't do this to me. Show me what you are for yourself. Show me what you are for yourself. And it's just like there's this organ tone, and black crepe curtains begin to rise. And after about 30 seconds of that, you say, that's enough, thank you, of what you are for yourself. Let's go back to the dancing mice, the little flying saucer guys, the cheerful assurance of the approaching end of the world, all that. Because, ultimately what you're thrown back on is that you are a monkey. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but on the other hand, it's nothing to write out of the equation either. You're a monkey, for God's sake. And yet you're asking to understand the nature of reality. What would you think of a squirrel that ran around with that as a goal? I mean, you would just think, what? Why don't you just bury nuts, make noise in the trees?
So what to you then is the purpose of pursuing this wisdom?
Just that there's an immense thrill in understanding. That the thrill is to sort of be in on the joke, just a little bit. And it's so strange to me. Every culture that's ever existed has believed that it had 95% of the story and that the other 5% would arrive within 10 years. And it didn't matter whether they were slitting open oxen and reading livers or building the superconducting super collider. I mean, that is nothing more than reading livers. The idea that, you build an instrument 16 kilometers in circumference to probe the nature of the top quark. I mean, how many people on Earth actually know what the top quark is, for God's sake. I certainly don't. So a bunch of people have marched off into the forest of fishy formula, and they're, hurling shit down on the rest of us because we don't understand, when in fact the whole thing, it's becoming clearer and clearer, is made out of magic.
Well, that would imply that subatomic particles, getting back to that